Ever feel like the more you learn about holiday traditions, the more questions you have? We're right there with you. Today we're digging into the history of Christmas, specifically those persistent rumors about its connection to the pagan holiday Yule. You've probably heard that Christmas is just a rebranded Yule, right? That some of those ancient traditions were just well grandfathered in. Let's rewind the clock to 10th century Norway, where things get really interesting. We're talking about King Haakon the Good, a ruler who found himself walking a tightrope between his own beliefs and the will of his people. Our main source here, Heimskringla, History of the Kings of Norway, actually lays out a law decreed by Haakon. It states that Yule should be celebrated on December 25th, as per Christian custom. This law really throws a wrench into the usual story we hear.
It's crucial to understand Haakon's background here. He converted to Christianity in England and then returned to Norway with a goal: to spread the Christian faith throughout his kingdom. But as you can imagine, convincing a whole nation to abandon their deeply held traditions, especially those tied to powerful pagan leaders, wasn't going to be a walk in the park.
So we have this Christian King Haakon caught between his faith and the need to maintain political stability. Imagine the scene. He's participating in pagan toast, probably thinking, gotta keep the peace. Plus, who's gonna turn down a celebratory drink?
And that's where the popular narrative takes a sharp turn. Haakon's story isn't about merging Christmas and Yule. It's about a calculated attempt to keep them separate, even if it meant some compromises along the way.
So what's the takeaway for you? History is rarely black and white. The story of Yule and Christmas, way more complicated than you might think. Speaking of surprising origins, let's move from holiday dates to decorations. We're talking about the Christmas tree, that evergreen icon of the season. Get ready for a plot twist. Its roots might surprise you.
Forget those images of ancient druids and forests. The Christmas tree story actually seems to start in a less likely place, a church.
We're talking churches now.
Exactly. We can trace it back to medieval Germany and a tradition known as the paradise tree. Our sources, Time magazine, and a fascinating article titled Adam, Eve, and the Paradise Tree, paint a vivid picture of this tradition, which was rooted not in pagan rituals, but in the biblical story of Adam and Eve.
Okay, so Adam and Eve, not ancient druids. Got it. So when are we talking here, like what time period? Medieval Germany feels kind of broad.
Good point. We're talking about the early 1400s here. One source even pinpoints the year 1419, when a guild in Freiburg, Germany, erected a tree adorned with apples, wafers, tinsel, and gingerbread.
Hold on, gingerbread. Like the cookies, on a tree.
Yeah, pretty wild, right?
Wild's an understatement.
What?
So what's the deal with that? What's the deeper meaning?
Those decorations weren't just festive, they were symbolic. The apples represented the fall of man from grace. The wafers symbolized redemption through the Eucharist. That is, wafers symbolizing Holy Communion in their religious practices. And the tinsel and gingerbread, well, they added a touch of celebratory flair.
I guess even back then they needed a little extra something. So tinsel and gingerbread, I get. But what about those candles you always see on Christmas trees?
Yes, the candles. Those were linked to the staging of paradise plays, which were medieval mystery plays that dramatically depicted the story of Adam and Eve, their expulsion from the Garden of Eden, and the promise of a savior.
Wait a minute, so you're telling me they were using these decorated trees as props in theatrical performances?
That's exactly right.
That's wild.
And get this, over time, this theatrical element transitioned from the stage to the home. What began as a prop in a play gradually became a tradition in German homes, often set up on December 24th, which was the feast day of Adam and Eve.
It's incredible how something as seemingly simple as a decorated tree can have such deep roots in religious practice and cultural history. It really makes you see the Christmas tree in a whole new light, doesn't it? So from political maneuvering in ancient Norway to gingerbread on paradise trees in Germany, who knew Christmas history could be so wild?
It really shows how digging deeper into a topic can completely change the way we see it.
Right. Like we started this whole deep dive thinking Christmas was just rebranded Yule. And that's not even close to the whole story.
It's a great example of how much we miss when we just scratch the surface of history. When we actually examine the historical context and those primary sources, it's like the whole picture comes into focus.
Yeah, it's kind of like those magic eye posters. You know, the ones where you got to like relax your eyes and then boom, 3D image. It's like we went from these flat assumptions about Yule and Christmas to this whole nuanced story with King Haakon trying to like strategically separate the holidays. And don't even get me started on those medieval Germans putting gingerbread on their trees. Like, can you imagine? The year is 1419. You're strolling through Freiburg, Germany, And there it is, a giant tree covered in apples, wafers, tinsel, and gingerbread.
It really makes you appreciate how much traditions have evolved. Like, we think of Christmas trees as this timeless thing, but they are really a product of centuries of cultural change and religious influence.
It's like those gingerbread-covered trees hold the secrets of like 1,000 Christmases. Pretty cool when you think about it.
It makes you wonder about all the other traditions we have. Like, what are their hidden stories and how did they come to be part of our celebrations today?
Right. Like, what's the story behind eggnog? Or mistletoe? The world needs to know.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. But hey, keep that curiosity alive, keep asking those questions, and we'll be back soon with another deep dive into history's most fascinating mysteries. Until then, happy digging.